Welcome to the Juniper podcast, where we talk about the more nuanced aspects of being a pet parent with some of the most interesting people in the pet space. Let's get into it. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Juniper podcast. Super excited for today's episode. We're here with Ebony Richardson, who's the founder of Atlanta Dog Mom Club and is doing some really interesting things with nonprofit. I've learned so much from Ebony, so super excited to jump in and just start chatting with you. Ebony, can you tell us a little bit about how you started this?
Hey, first of all, thank you guys for having me on. I'm going to try to not be as nervous as possible. So Atlanta Dog Mom, it's funny because it just started as a hobby. So my full-time job is doing like freelance social media and like content writing. And I was just curious of if I created my own account, doing it exactly how I want, right? Because when I have clients, I'm trying to make sure that it produces a certain amount and make sure that the KPIs are a certain place. And I'm like, what if I just have an account where I just wing it and do whatever I want and see what grows from there? So it started as just can I find other dog moms in my area? Because my dog is not a dog park dog. She's a one-on-one with other dogs kind of girl. And so I was just like, I want to find some friends that have dogs so we can have backyard play dates. And it just kind of blew up from there. Like, I didn't expect things to take off as fast as they have. It was really a community that really wanted to see a lot of diversity from a lot of different aspects. Like where I live, I say Atlanta because that's the largest city near me. But if anyone knows Atlanta, I live in Clayton County. So I live maybe about 30 minutes outside of the city of Atlanta. So for one, most of the dog events are always downtown. They're always at least 30 minutes away from here. And then I think also just kind of culturally, when you do go to dog mom events, a lot of times it's not a ton of diversity there, which doesn't seem like a big deal on the surface level. But as someone who's like worked in animal welfare for almost a decade now, there are certain things that we've talked about before when we talk about like the economics that go into pet care and the way that people may perceive other people's pet care as being like more or less worthy and things like that. So there's a lot of maybe like subtle nuances that I think people really wanted to see representation of them loving their pets and them being involved in pet care, not feeling like, oh, when I come around these people, I feel poor, or I feel, like my dog isn't that well behaved, or, they might be looking at me funny because I have a pit bull and they have Labradoodles, so just little things like that, I think is what people really attach to with my brand of saying, hey, I'm on the south side of Atlanta. I want to do dog mom events for us over here. And people just like really rallied around me with that. And it just kind of took off. So now it's grown into like a social club where we do like dog mom events. They're all planned by me right now, which is awful. I'm going to try to spread the word, spread the team eventually. Because I don't love event planning as much as I thought I did. But I do love the way the community shows up when we have our events. So we have the social club. And from there, I decided to start a pet pantry, which is now morphed into a pet thrift store. And that's the 501(c) like nonprofit side. So it's all Atlanta Dog Mom Club, but we have like the Atlanta Dog Mom Social Club. And then we have the Atlanta Dog Mom 501(c) that I've named Atlanta Dog Mom Full Hearts. So that's kind of what we're doing. We're a social club. We're going to do some community service work, do some volunteer work, but really just create spaces for people to come and talk about their dogs and still feel like themselves and not feel out of place.
I love that. And I don't think these are little things either. I think you've hit on something that's actually pretty big. I love that you're almost like doing it locally and finding this real problem and then finding a way to solve it. So blown away that you're also spinning out a nonprofit on top of everything else and your job and everything else you're doing. So can you tell us a little bit about like, how did you start a nonprofit from scratch? What goes into that? What stage are you at? And what are you most excited about?
Yeah, I did not plan it either, to be honest. I'm really happy with the direction that everything is going. As a person who has ADHD, I start an idea, then I start a new idea, then I start a new idea. So the pet pantry thing was really something that it had been in the back of my mind to say, one day when I get some money, when I grow up and I get a real job, then I'll be able to do something like this, right? So it was always like, oh, I want to do something pet related to give back to my community later, but not immediately right now. And I will say what really kind of motivated me to take the plunge with that is in May of last year, my uncle passed away. And we always had a really strong bond as far as being the animal people in the family. Like me from a very young age, it was obvious that I was Eliza Thornberry was like my role model growing up of like, I want to work with animals. I want to talk to animals. I was that kid. And he was the role model for me in that way because he was that adult. He was the one taking care of stray cats in the alleys, like when we had to give away my dog when we were younger, he took her in. And so he was always encouraging me to get into veterinary medicine and to like pursue my animal loving tendencies. And so when he passed away and I went to Chicago, where I'm originally from, he was still taking care, like he and I were always talking about these cats in his backyard. And the same cats would come have kittens every year. And he's like, I'm trying to trap them to get them neutered, but I don't really know. So it just really stood out to me that even after he's passed, like those cats were still there. They're still coming to the house, like to this day. And they understand that his house is like a safe space, the little alley cats in the neighborhood. And so I'm like, my Uncle Ricky, he didn't necessarily have a lot of money and he was still doing what he could. And so from there, I said, you know what? I'm not going to wait until I get my big girl job and I get a good career. I'm like, I'm just going to start it now. I'm going to just put it out there and whoever wants to help can help. At the first meetup that we had with the Dog Mom Club, we had so many donations, like way more than I anticipated. I thought people would bring like a can of something, but I had at least the full trunk of my car and my backseat just filled with stuff. And so from that, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm just going to run with it. It was not on my bingo card for 2024, but I was really inspired by the support that I received and just being able to help people get the food who needed it. It was just amazing. So I'm like, I would do this for free.
I'm so inspired by you and your uncle's story as well, because it sort of proves that like anyone can have a legacy. I think a lot of people, especially in for some reason, and I see this in the animal world all the time, it's always like, if I was rich, I would open a sanctuary, like these huge ideas, and like that would be so cool. And of course, like it's fun to dream, but it's also, you're so right. You're like, what can I do here right now with what I have? And then let the community come through. That's such an awesome story. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, it was really inspiring. And I think you touched on a great point pet care does cost a lot of money. I definitely don't want to downplay that, but I think it is something that we very much feel like, oh, I have to have grants and I have to have funding and and it's like, not really. Sometimes you can just say, hey, can you bring some food? And people will do it. I think I had that problem of trying to start it out perfectly. And I really had to calm down and just say, do what you can with what you have right now. And so you don't need Purina to sponsor to whatever, just ask people and people give,
Yeah, I'm a big believer in that idea of the small incremental change and how even these, they feel like little actions, but they can have such an impact. And I think that plays in really well to the idea that when we help people, we help pets. And sometimes it can be as simple as helping a couple of individuals. And then the ripple effects of that help can just be so amazing. Like I'm just floored every time I hear some of these examples. Can you talk a little bit more about, that idea of helping people helps pets? And it's not just about the animals. It's not like, oh, we like animals better than people. It's we love animals and people and we want to help them all together.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up because that's a huge, like, as someone who works in the veterinary community, but I also used to own like a pet sitting business. And like I said, from a kid, I've been like fighting my way into veterinary clinics and stuff. So I've been around for a while and I definitely see that mentality. And it's 100% the wrong, like when people say, I want to work in vet med because I don't like people. I'm like, girl, you have to talk to people. The pets are not paying the bills. The pets are not telling you what's wrong. You're going to have to deal with people to figure that out. I think it's layered why people do that because I think animals are innocent in the way that we operate in the human world. And so I think people can you can get conflicted with other people. You might judge them. You might say, that's a good person. That's a bad person. But we don't do that with animals. All animals are good animals. And I think doing that can make people kind of put them above humans to where sometimes people will think that they're doing what's best for the pet by not thinking about the human at all. A good example of that, I just wrote a blog post on FIGO, pet insurance, about if homeless people should have pets. Because I hear that question asked so often. And oftentimes what people will do is say, oh, I'm going to go rescue that pet from this homeless person, as if the homeless person is in this situation to be antagonistic to their pet. And I think it's interesting to look at a situation like that and go, let me take from this person. This person literally has no home. And I'm going to go in here and I'm going to take something away from them because it makes me feel better about what I think is best for, And so I think it's really easy to go down that path when you're dealing with animal welfare. And that's one of the reasons why, like in the pet pantry and pet thrift store that I'm building, I'm really intentional about checking myself and checking the way that I'm building it to make sure it's accessible to as many people as possible. So I'm intentionally I'm not putting any income restrictions. I'm not looking at your W-2 or whatever. I literally just trust people. If you say you need help, I'm going to help you. You can do what you afford. I'm choosing to make it like a choose your price kind of store so that people can choose what's affordable to them. So I'm not going to tell you, hey, you make this amount of money, so you should be able to pay X, Y. It's literally like a sliding scale. Pay whatever you can just to help keep the doors open. But even if you can't pay anything, that's also fine too. But I think it's really empowering to let people make their own decisions. So I think oftentimes when we're helping people who are in need, quote, quote, then we think we know better than them. And so we'll say, oh, well, you can only have food for 3 months. And if your situation hasn't improved in 3 months, maybe you should put your dog in the shelter. But then we also are mad at them when they bring their dogs to the shelter, right? So we say, don't have a pet if you can't afford it. But also when you drop this pet off at the shelter, you're kind of shitty for just giving up your pet. Why would you do that? But also, if you're homeless, you should not have that pet either. You should give it to somebody who's able to take care of it.
So yeah, thinking about that stigma with money and pets and these ideas that, you have to have this perfect right amount of income in order to take care of an animal. Can you talk a little bit more about how you've seen that play out in your community and why it is a myth? It's a false idea that there's, some threshold you have to be past in order to be a good enough dog guardian.
Yeah, that's a really good point because I've seen in different animal welfare spaces that I've seen, there's a lot of different types of discrimination that happens because people think that they're doing what's best for the pet, at the expense of people by doing things like having restrictions on adoptions to certain areas of town or specifically certain zip codes and things like that. And it's like a conversation where people say, I'm colorblind. And it's not really helpful to be colorblind. Because when you're saying, oh, it's not about that, it's about the zip codes. Zip codes are heavily reliant on racism. And if you think about who was allowed to live in certain neighborhoods, who's been allowed to live in areas that have single family homes. So there's a reason that certain people may live in certain areas of town where it's always just been high-rise apartments. And that goes beyond their ability to care for a pet. It's just, this is their situation. This is where they live. Especially when people make generalized, I think everybody should just be evaluated on an individual basis. And I'll say, even here, in my area, I went with my mom to a local shelter to help her find her dog a few years ago. And when we walked into the shelter, the person who we were talking to, he immediately was like, it's really hard to get a dog from us. We don't adopt out a lot of dogs. We would rather keep them here because we know that they'll be taken care of because we don't know how people are taken care of. Just assuming the worst about everybody. And I hate to say it, but literally the only thing that got him to change his demeanor about us is one, when I said that we have a backyard, and two, when he realized that my mom is an OBGYN. And once he realized that, economic status, his attitude completely changed. completely changed. And I'm like, we're literally the same people, but I told you the right things to make you feel like we're wealthy or to make you feel like we're wealthy enough. And now you want to let us foster, you want to let us take them home. But when we walked in the door, you said it's really hard to get a dog from us. Like, why would that be the first thing you say to someone coming to a shelter? So it's just a lot of judgment. And I think a lot of people using their like personal morality to try to say, well, what is the right conditions for the dogs? But I think, or just pets in general, not just dogs, but I think it's really interesting because we're also going through like a loneliness crisis. So we have too many pets in the shelters, and we have people who are having severe mental health issues, severe physical health issues, and some people want to make it harder I think we should be focused on how can as many people keep pets in their home as possible? How can everyone who has an interest and who wants to, how can we help them afford it? And even if we say, well, pet care is expensive, you have to have the money, we should think about how to make it less expensive and more accessible, and not, well, the threshold of who can afford a pet is going to keep rising every year. Pet care costs are rising every year. And I think the most effective way to combat that is to think about opening more doors, not shutting doors and gatekeeping.
Here at Juniper, we make content for your favorite pet brands. We're 100% women owned and operated, and you can hire us to create your articles, blogs, videos, email marketing campaigns, lead generation guides, and more. Visit us at www.juniperpet.co to learn more. Thanks for listening.
This is one of my most passionate conversations lately because I don't love admitting this, but when I was younger, I very much fell into the camp where I was kind of self-righteous about pet things. And I was like, how dare anyone ever abandon their pet? That's awful. What kind of person are you? And prided myself on the things that I thought I knew about dogs and the things that I could do. And I failed to realize until the last, honestly, probably like within the last decade, the last 5 or 6 years, I failed to realize how much of that was a result of access that I had been able to have to different resources, even just on the education front. And when I realized that what we want to do is keep pets in their homes, and that the ways to do that are to help the people and to help put these resources, both financial and educational, in front of them. You can't be a good dog guardian if no one has ever helped you figure out what it is that dogs need, what it means to take care of a canine in this modern world. So I'm so thrilled that more people are talking about this now, and that this is one of the focuses of the Atlanta Dog Mom Club. Can you talk a little bit more about some of that gatekeeping and other ways you see it show up?
That's a good question. And so this kind of hits on that, but it made me think about when we were talking about people who are unhoused having pets. So this is according to the ASPCA. In 2019, 12% of unsheltered homeless adults own pets. And it was reported that 48% of unhoused pet-owning parents were turned away from shelters because of pet policies. So they're either heading to shelters that don't allow animals, and there's no, hey, can you hold my dog for the night? That means leave your dog outside, hope they're there in the morning. And because of that, according to the ASPCA, 22% of the people who they surveyed refused shelter because they did not want to be separated from their pets. And so that really stood out to me as far as, again, people debating, like, should these people have pets? And they're literally choosing to sleep on the street to make sure that they aren't separated from their pets. And there's a lot of us sitting in the suburbs and sitting in our cozy homes, and we say, I would never separate from my dog. I would blah, blah, blah. But you see people literally sleeping on the streets with their pets, and then we judge them too. That just stood out to me. I'm like, that's crazy.
We judge them, and then we also follow Instagram accounts of camping, adventures with your dog, all of these things where it's just like, Haley can speak to this to some degree. Not that it's the same with van life stuff, but it's like what I'm inspired by those type of adventure accounts is, wow, your dog doesn't really need that much. Here I am in my house thinking I need to buy her a new collar or a new whatever. Like, your dog, what do they actually need? Like, let's get real about that. That helps everybody, right? And so the other thing too is if you do have means, I could buy 100 different outfits for my dog. I have means to support her. I could go all the way out on the expensive end of the spectrum for food. We don't, different episode, but like, I could. And so at some point you need to think, if you're in that position, like I am right now, what else can I do? What would be a better use of that money or time? Give it to a shelter or rescue that I believe in, that I work with, that I know, or like support Atlanta Dog Mom Club and your nonprofits that you're building out that are actually going to like put food, pet food directly to people who need it. Like, yes, you can spoil your pet. I'm not saying don't spoil your pet. Obviously, we built a fun shop on the Juniper side of the site. You know, you deserve to have fun with your pet too. But like, they really don't need that much. What do they need? They need food, some version of shelter that you can provide, exercise, mental stimulation. There's an argument to be made that if you work less, you might have more time to spend with dogs, right? Like, are dogs who are people who make a ton of money, but they're gone all day? Are those dogs having a great life? Like, we're not even asking those questions because those people just make a lot of money. They have a house for the dog or whatever. Like anything else, there's so much nuance that people don't talk about. But it's something I think too is like, if you do have means, how are you giving back? And I almost think it's like a nice way to honor your pet too. Like, instead of buying that super expensive high-end version of something, could you just buy more food for a shelter or rescue? It's just something that I like to think about too. I'm being on the other side of this pet ownership dynamic.
Yeah, I felt that pressure too. Like, even before I started making the first like social media post for Atlanta Dog Mom, I was like, oh, I should get her like a matching harness and leash. And I really had to deprogram myself and be like, in real life, does she care if her harness matches her leash? She really does not. She does not care. And I don't have to go spend $60 so Instagram can tell me that I'm being a good pet parent the right way, because it's the aesthetic way to do things, right? So it's a lot of pressure from a lot of different angles to just not feel like, I think no one wants to feel like they're, just like with kids, you want to feel like you're giving your kids the best life possible. And so the same reason that parents will buy their kids name brand and they'll make sure their 8-year-old daughter has a Stanley Cup, not because she needs it, but because they don't want her to feel left out. I think some of that also gets transferred to pets, where people, they don't want to look like their dog is not taken care of. And, I really try to just be as authentic as I can with the content that I create of like, this is what it looks like in real life. Like, her bed is dirty. All of her toys are not monochrome. They don't all match. She needs to be muzzle trained. We're working on that. It's not all rainbows and butterflies, but I really wanted to put a more realistic perspective of what pet parenthood can be, and not make people feel like their version of that is not as good, is not as acceptable.
I think that's so important. And one of the things that I love so much about the Atlanta Dog Mom Club is this social aspect. And like, when you were talking about your reason for starting it and recognizing that your dog isn't a dog park dog, but that she's still a social creature and she needs that social time with you. And it sounds like she does enjoy it with other dogs in specific scenarios, when it's more one-on-one. And I think that that's one of the most important things that we can do as pet guardians, is think about them as these social creatures who, our species have been alongside each other for so many generations. And that is one of the things that matters most. I mean, this is mildly controversial in some of the scientific circles, depending on how you define your terms. But I'm of the belief that I will call social interaction a basic need for humans and dogs. Like, it's on my list of things that Scout needs every day, alongside like food and water. Like, she needs that social fulfillment. And I think it's amazing to have this club where that is one of the focuses, and that it's so inclusive, because sometimes getting that social fulfillment for both ends of the leash is hard when there's all of this gatekeeping, or you feel like you have to have a certain kind of dog to do it. Like, now we're not only just talking about all of the products and that pressure, but like you were talking about muzzle training. Like, Scout is muzzle trained. Scout does not enjoy being around other dogs. Sometimes it's tough to find communities where that's understood and you feel like that's going to be respected. Can you share a little bit more about how you've seen that show up in your community? It sounds like the Atlanta Dog Mom Club is just crushing it when it comes to making sure that all of these people and pets feel welcome.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Because that is at the forefront of, I think when you're building a brand, it's very easy to kind of become distracted with bells and whistles. And I feel like I'm constantly reminding myself of like, what is the point? The point is not to be the fanciest, cute. I mean, I do like an aesthetic, but even in, figuring out like what kind of activities are we going to do, and very much thinking about what are the core values of the brand. I really am trying to keep that in the forefront. I want to create an online community where people can intermingle with themselves in between the events. So like you said, because that pet parenthood, like you need support. And sometimes you just want to talk to people about dogs and know that they're not going to roll their eyes or, that they'll be interested or they're excited when you get your training accomplishments and everything. So I want to create a online space to go with the in-person meetups and stuff to be able to have that community bonds, but also to be able to foster a way for people to talk about pets and it doesn't get crazy. Because I know that, the Facebook groups, if you say raw food or if you say, e-collars, it's going up in flames. You can't say anything, so that is something that I've been trying to be careful about because I am like a fear-free certified dog trainer. I used to dog train a few years ago, and I've kind of stepped out of it. I do really love it, but I've just got distracted with other ADHD. I'm like, that was cool when it was, and now I'm on to something else. So that was cute. But I am a fear-free person, and I do think that it can get hard sometimes when you do want to support everyone, and I want everyone to feel included. And I don't want to encourage people against the things that I believe that I consider like adversive tools. So that has been a little bit of a balancing act of bringing people together. It's great, but I need everyone to respect where everyone is at on their journey, because even though I don't use adversive tools, I don't want to say that you can't come to the Dog Mom Club because your dog has an e-collar on or because you do. I really want to keep it, like I said, accessible and inclusive so that we can learn together. And even if we're not all in agreement about exactly the same way to do everything, I think it's important to have space for diversity,
Oh, absolutely. Especially because there's so much bad info out there about dogs, dog training. It's part of why we started Juniper, to get good info out there. I love that you're doing that and sharing. If you're welcoming to everybody, then maybe people will learn from being around other people who are figuring out how to do it in a different way. Such a great way to change people's minds, I think, is by just meeting people in person and actually making connections. So you're an incredible community builder, so innovative. This was such a good conversation. I learned so much every time I talk to you and by following you. And so can you tell people how to donate, where to follow you, how to join Atlanta Dog Mom Club and support the Pet Pantry, and where are all of your projects living?
Right now, we just have an Instagram. That's because, like I said, I manage social media as my day job. And so I was like, we have one social media. We have an Instagram. That's it. I'm not building 100 more pages for me to manage. So you can follow us on Instagram at ATL Dog Mom Social Club. You can also follow us at ATL Dog Mom Full Hearts. If you just type ATL Dog Mom, they'll both come up. One of them is a social club for our meetups. The other one is going to be more focused on the pet pantry and the thrift store. But on our Instagram, we have links so that you can join the Dog Mom Club. You can sign up to join our mailing list. And I am going to have an out of state, like you don't have to live in Atlanta. I've gotten a lot of support from people outside of Atlanta who just want to be in part of this community. So I am creating a space where you can be, if you're Atlanta and you're local and here's the events going on, but also anybody can join who just wants to support this cause. So you can just sign up on my email list for more information about that. The community has just grown so fast, and I'm excited to create more space for people to have positivity associated with their pet care. So thank you for allowing me to come and talk on this platform about that.
Oh, thank you so much for being on this podcast. This was such a great episode, and I learned so much from you. Thank you so much, Ebony. And I hope everybody goes, follows, and supports and reaches out after listening to this episode. That's all for today. To learn more and discover the best hand-picked pet products, visit Juniper at www.juniperpet.co.